All right. So welcome. All right. So first of all, Thurben, thank you so much for the invitation. And to whomever gets this and sees this, I trust you are building a phenomenal relationship with Thurben and everything that he's bringing to the table. His energy, his efforts, his wisdom, his focus, his determination, his discipline is a force of nature, one to be reckoned with. So model him and stay in his sphere because he's going places and he will absolutely take you with him. With that being said, thank you. My name is Doug, and Thurben had asked me to come share some stuff because we met through Walter Amarillo, through Alchemist Nation, and the goal behind the Alchemist Nation with Walter is to help create 100 millionaires or more, to help them create 100 millionaires. And Thurben obviously is on that path, and he's not only focused on generating that millionaire status for himself, it's also to support others in getting that same achievement in their world. Now, what's great about that is the whole mindset of serving others, that the more value you bring to others, the more you will able to receive yourself. So a little backstory on me. I've had a wild and crazy ride, as I'm sure many of you have. And this may help because in today's day and age, things are getting more stressful, more challenging. People are having to pivot, right? This is the word, pivot, and reinvent ourselves. There's these industry disruptors, and real estate and business is certainly one of those places where a lot of changes happen, especially around technology. And this is a valuable understanding and something that we definitely need to be on top of if you and I are going to succeed. And I know this because I lived it. I started my career out in music, and some of you can, if you're watching this, you can see behind me, I have a bunch of guitars. That is, I don't have the awards up there, up somewhere else, but I'm more proud of my guitars than I am the Grammys. But the truth is I started out as an artist, as a musician. And like many of you, if you are in a RIA, you want to go out and get properties and you want to do it. Maybe you've done some and it hasn't happened the way you thought it was going to. Well, I had the same experience early in my career around music. I wanted to be an artist, and I was. And I went into the studio, and the records didn't come out the way I had in my mind, like in my head, in my heart. My vision for the music was not what it ended up being when I left the studio. And I loved the process. I was like, wow, I love being in the studio and making these records. But when it was done, it's like, this ain't right. I had my father was a very successful, at that time, he'd become successful in believe it or not, in real estate to some degree, more in the lending side. And if I wanted to, I would have gotten basically a free ride to any college of my choice that would accept me. I was kicked out of all my high schools, but I did graduate, and I was able to, if I chose to, go to college. And I went to one day, and I realized that that was not for me, that college was worse than high school. So I pursued my music career on my own. I basically got a job as an intern. And basically all I did was basically do coffee runs, cut tape, solder wires. I was a gopher, for lack of a better term. So whatever anybody needed, I was there to help out. Now, mind you, I was like 20, so we were 21. It's not like I was, an old man trying to figure this out. I was still reasonably young. And when I'd done the research, and this may be instructive, I did the research on school versus just going out and interning and learning that way. And because I said, my dad will pay for school. So I looked into it, and it turned out that anyone who was successful in the music industry was self-made. They didn't go to school for it. They just did it. They learned from other people. They modeled other people. Now, let me back up a little bit. At a younger age, around 16, 17, I started to get into Tony Robbins. So you may or may not know who Tony is. Thurben, do you know who Tony Robbins is?
I do.
Okay. So I started with Personal Power. If you remember, the first Tony Robbins program was called Personal Power. And I came home one night and I was drunk. I was like 16 years old, 17 years old. And I was living with my mom at the time. And I was like, Mom, give me your credit card. And she's like, for what? And I'm like, good, Tony Robbins, Personal Power. I need that. And she goes, oh, honey, we have that. It's downstairs. And I go downstairs in our den, and there it was, still sealed. And I have them somewhere. I should probably break them out. But it's they were cassettes. So I'm going to date myself here. You know what a cassette is, Thurben?
Not really, no.
Not real. Oh my gosh, you don't know what a cassette is. Okay, so a cassette was, if you wanted to play something and listen to something, you had to take it. It only had about 60 minutes on it. So about 30 minutes per side, 60 to 90 minutes. And you had to put it in a thing, and it had two little things, and it would spin and it would play the tape, and you'd have to listen to it that way. You couldn't skip the way you do a disc or an MP3. So I digress. I applied that. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because of what I learned and now what I do. I applied what Tony taught. And one of the main things that Tony, and this is early in Tony's career. So Tony became well known because of the way he used NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And now just cut ahead a little bit. I am now a master practitioner and trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, and I've learned it from the guys that taught Tony. So I'm taught by Tony and the guys that taught Tony as well in NLP and in breakthroughs. So I applied what I learned from Tony, which is modeling. Now, this is essentially the opportunity that you all have when you come to these RIAs. You have the opportunity to meet people who are getting the results that you want to achieve. And then the science is, if you do what other people did to get the results that they got, you will in turn get the results that they got, should you follow the same path. Now, there are subtleties in this because there are a lot of things that go on in the background, though, that oftentimes you may not see, you may not have awareness of. So this is where it's really important that you build relationships so you could ask questions. Because, Thurben, I'm sure you've seen this. You've seen someone do something and they go, well, that looks really easy. Yet some of the stuff they're doing in the background, like, you wrote a book on it. I'm sure someone could say, wow, Thurben read, how many books did you read in a year? What's your
I read 107 last year.
107 books. So from the outside looking in, one would go, okay, in order to read 107 books, all you do is read 107 books. Now, you wrote a book on how to read 107 books, which means that there is some energy behind it. There's some strategies. There's some ninja moves, tips, tricks beyond. And more importantly, there's a mindset behind it. There's a motivation behind it. There's something that is going on inside your head that helps this all make sense for you to follow through, to have the discipline to do that. So I learned NLP at a pretty young age because I was having challenges in my relationships. Now, my experience has been, and I'm going to hallucinate that you'd agree, Thurben, is that all business is relationships. That we are in the business of relationships that has some transactional value, and we only do business with people we know, like, and trust. So in order to create an experience with someone who knows us, likes us, and trusts us, we have to be exemplary communicators, exemplary listeners, and modelers of those that are successful. So people go, I want to hang with you because successful people hang out with other successful people. So I applied all of this that I learned from Tony, and in that one program, that's just the tip of the iceberg, but it was essentially what your group does at the high level. Is we get together and we have the opportunity to learn. Someone shares some information, and then you have the opportunity to build a relationship, to ask them. So very similar to what you and I have. We met, build a relationship. I know, like, and trust you. You said, hey, can you, would you mind sharing some of your experience with my group? And I say, hey, any group that Thurben's got is probably going to be a rock star group. And of course, I'd love to support you. So that's the power of the relationship, the ability to reach out to someone and say, hey, I have a question, or I have an opportunity. And then someone will take advantage of it and say yes or no, or not yet, or here's my schedule, or what have you. But the key is building the relationship. So I was in the music industry as an intern at a studio, and here's what I did, and I'm sharing this with you because of the value of putting the time in. So my hours were 10 to 6. So I would show up at the studio at 10 o'clock, clean up, get the studio ready. Most people would start coming in around 10:30. A lot of times the session may not start until noon. And then I would be available at their beck and call until 6 p.m., at which point I was able to leave. Now, I wasn't getting paid for any of this. I would then stay from 6 o'clock till whenever the session was done. So when is that session? I guess, we lost Thurben? What happened here?
Recording in progress.
Hey Doug, my phone overheated, so
all good.
are you sorry about that?
Are you soaring properties?
I'm sorry.
Are you soaring properties?
Properties?
Soaring Properties Corporation entered the waiting room.
No, that's Josh.
All right. I'll let him in. All right. So, welcome, Josh. All right. So, we're in the mid-story, so I don't know where you lost me. I think it was still recording, but what was happening was I work in the studio as an intern from 10 to 6. Then I would stay from 6 until, what's going on? From 6 until whenever. We're in the middle of a story. I don't know. Well, I guess since you could chop this up, Thurben. So what's going on, Josh? Well, people are starting to show up.
Not much. I just got back from a kid's birthday party with the kids. So
right on. Cool. Well, we're just Thurben had
anything.
I'm sorry?
How about yourself?
Yeah, rocking and rolling. Thurben had asked me to give a little backstory as to my experience, so I'm giving him sort of the high level look at how I got to where I am, and
awesome. Got some sick guitars back there too.
Thank you. Well, we're kind of talking about that because I'm sharing about my first career, which is music, and what I did to succeed in that, and then how that applies to everything.
Awesome. Well, I'll listen in.
Right on. So where I got to is basically how I started in the industry. I started working as an intern, working for nothing. So I worked from 10 to 6 as the intern, basically getting coffee, getting lunches, cutting tape, doing all that, patching stuff, wrapping up cables, cleaning up, breaking down drum kits, putting it up, all that good stuff. And it was a pretty prestigious, and it's one of the few studios left on Long Island. It was a pretty prestigious studio. The owners of it were, one of them was the guy that discovered Taylor Dane, and then worked with like Mariah Carey and all that stuff. And then the other owner was the original sax player of Billy Joel's band. So he was out on the road when I was there with like the Beach Boys and all this stuff. So I was making some great records. That's why I took the gig, because it was an opportunity to be around people getting the results. And what we'd shared earlier was one of the formulas for success is hang around with people who their normal is what you aspire to. So in music, I wanted to be around. Oh, you're on Long Island. Awesome. So this was in Glen Cove, Cove City Sound Studios. It's still there, right at the end of Glen Cove Road, or the very end of Glen Cove Road. So, excuse me. By doing this, I was able to, I worked from 10 to 6 as an intern, then from 6 till whenever the session was done. and I would just build relationship. I would get to know the people, the artists, the producers, the engineers, everyone that came in. I would just learn and ask questions, how to be successful. How, what do you do when this doesn't work? How do I should do this? Get this happening and get their feedback and create massive rapport so that they would be rooting for me and wanting me to succeed and share their wisdom. Then when they would leave, it got to the point that I would then practice what I had learned from them in the studio. So I would basically work for another couple of hours and I'd practice, I'd mix, I'd try all these things so that I had a working understanding of what it was that they were doing, and I was applying it there. Then I'd sleep for a few hours. There was a shower there, and then I would do that again. And I did that for 6 months before they would start paying me. Then they started paying me, and then I just worked my way up to staff producer, and we were winning Grammys with Celine Dion and J-Lo, and I co-produced the second Widowmaker record, and we were doing great stuff. I was the rock guy, and so for almost 10 years, I was on top of the world. We were making great records, winning Grammys, buying my first home, like all of that, getting married, all that great stuff, having the cars, all the great stuff. Now, during that time, technology started to grow. And Josh, do you know what a cassette is?
Like a cassette tape or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So we're dating myself. That was how when I started listening to Tony Robbins, it was on cassette. And then, wow. Yeah, it was the first pro. I was like an early adopter. I was, Tony's older than me a few years, but he was in his early 20s when he made that. And
that's amazing.
So that was how I applied. So as Sharon, I applied what Tony taught to my life, and that was how I became successful in music, etc. So
that's amazing. The
peak of my career was when Napster came out. So do you remember Napster? You heard of that?
I don't. I'm maybe too young for Napster.
Not familiar with them. No.
Okay. So Napster was it was a digital technology. So it was the technology that allowed for the theft of music, for peer-to-peer. So Napster would allow people to connect their hard drives. So people would rip the CD, like for their MP3s, put it on their hard drive, and then just share it. So other people's didn't have to buy music. You could just go into Napster, download from other people's drives. So basically people were, you remember mixtapes where you'd make a tape and give it to somebody, right? Or I used to, when I was growing up, that's what we would do. Like we'd buy a record and then one of us would record it onto a cassette. So we'd split the record cost and then record a copy. So one of us could have a cassette, the other one could have the record, and we'd go back and forth because they didn't have CDs or MP3s or any way to store it. It was on a cassette. That was the way you had to listen. So once things got digital and everything was MP3s, the record companies and they stopped being able to make the same amount of money they were because people were just sharing rather than going out and buying it. So that was an industry disruptor. So I use that term, or Napster was essentially did to the music industry that like Uber did to the taxi industry. Changed it. They didn't know how to deal with it. Like they freaked out. So record companies started closing. So we were on, we had a record company. So we all closed. We were on A&M closed, and studios started closing because the same technology that allowed for the records, the studios, you didn't need all of that gear anymore. So now in a little computer, in your phone, there's more technology that you can make records and videos. I mean, think about all the videos and stuff that we're making with our phones.
Yeah, my little brother, he's like I don't know, he wants to be a rapper. Mm-hmm. And he records on his phone.
Right.
And puts it on Spotify.
Exactly. Back in the day,
Sorry.
Thurben.
No, I was gonna say even this call right now is just made possible because of technology.
Yeah.
Like I'm in
Yeah.
Texas. Normally I'm at home and I'm doing this call like on the go. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. And think about, so back then, so we're going back, 20 plus years, when that technology first came out, you couldn't, like, if you needed to make a record, you needed to go into a studio, or you needed to have a lot of gear. You couldn't just do it on your phone. You couldn't do it with your computer. You couldn't do it. And especially for that higher level stuff, for the multi-tracking and all of that, you needed the studio, and you needed someone who understood all of those racks of gear and where to plug things in and the microphones and all of that stuff. So I was there at the beginning of all of that, and I had to reinvent myself. I had to start over because studios were closing, record companies were closing. Everything that I had available to me as my resources didn't have the same value. My skill set didn't have the same value because you didn't need somebody. And true story, this happened to me. So there was a band that I was working with, a rock band, and I produced it, and our budget was roughly $250,000, of which I got 50 of it, right? And that was my fee. That was what I got to make the record, and it would, I was working for 3 months or whatever, so it was okay, decent pay. The rest of the money went to pay for the studio and pay for all of some of the other things, and the band got a little bit of an advance and whatnot. They got dropped. Record didn't do well. They got dropped. And the manager goes up to the record company begging and pleading and says, please give us another chance. Like we got this. And they said, look, tell you what, we'll give you 50 grand. Don't hire Doug. Don't hire anybody. Go out and buy a Pro Tools rig. Make as many songs as you want. When you feel you have a record, bring it to us. If we think it's ready, we'll go for it. If not, we'll send you back to do more. This is when I realized that the industry had shifted so much that it was time for me to look at other ways to continue to add value, but that was not going to be it. And so many people, studios and people left the business. Now, the cool thing is to your point, the playing field is considerably more level now, for good or for bad, because now you have the ability to make the record at home, throw it on Spotify, make a video, get it up on YouTube, use social media to build a following, and then you can monetize and make money. And I first got into speaking when all of that was happening. Back then, it was MySpace and Reverb. Those were the two social media sites that people were using to build their music career. So I was showing bands how to monetize, show them that basically they were in the music business, to show them how they could make money touring, through merch, through all of that. And that was how I moved into coaching and speaking. I started helping bands figure out how to be their own record company. Now, we're going to see the same thing happening right now. I mean, you don't hear it the same way, but what has Zillow done? Has that disrupted the real estate industry?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they were trying to figure out ways. What did they do? They went out and tried to buy up a bunch of real estate. That may not be the best strategy for them.
They failed it, but they did end up buying it. I heard.
Yeah, they're trying stuff.
Trying to fix and flip. Yeah.
Right. They're trying it. And what do you think that's going to do? What has Zillow done for Zillow and Facebook? So I know, and myself included, know people who don't even use real estate agents anymore to rent their properties. They just put it up on Marketplace.
Yeah, social media.
Yeah. What do I need an agent for?
It's very true.
So we're seeing these shifts in the industry. So the point I'm sharing is, one, when I shifted from the music industry, I looked at what did I love about doing music? Like what was the secondary gain? Like I couldn't believe people paid me for it, and I got paid handsomely for it. And I was like, I do this for nothing. And I would do it for nothing because I loved doing it. And I would have the record companies pay me a lot. And then I would have the weekend warriors, the guys who were a lot like me when I started. I would help them because I love to give them a record that I was never able to get when I was like that. I was like, man, like, because I knew how to make records, the things that I made, that I worked with these bands, they could come in and they go, oh my gosh, this sounds like the record, as opposed to when I started, it sounded like a demo. It was always not quite right. So that's where, like, I started to make that shift. Now I applied, and this is where, Thurben, when you're talking about communication, I applied everything that I learned in building myself in the music industry, and then I started going out and speaking and all of that. I applied everything that I learned to get the gig with Tony Robbins. So what happened was, I started getting into my relationship, everything was falling apart. But I started to really dig into Tony at that point. So I really started, like, kind of taking personal responsibility and going, I got to learn, like, what is wrong with my communication? Why are my now ex-wife and I having these problems? You know, how am I going to deal with this shift in the industry and all these things? So I really, like, tripled down on my personal development and invested heavily in myself, like, you know, $100,000 at a time when I didn't have anything. Well, I didn't have anything. I had to rebuild. I went from doing amazing to, you know, basically the way it works is, it's like you start slowly losing. And then all of a sudden, it's like, what happened? So I had that going on, and I completely, like, tripled down into investing in myself. And I started going to events. So I went to a Tony event. I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is insane. Like, okay, now this I understand. Like, this is better than a rock show. This is like, I'm learning and I'm having fun at the same time and meeting great people. So then I went to another event, T. Harv Ekker's first MMI in New York, in Brooklyn. And I walk in there and I sit down, I'm in there by myself, and I hear people talking about the Tony Robbins event from a little while ago. And I was like, I was there, and like, oh yeah, this was great. It's like, you know, you got to come join our power team. I was like, what's a power team? And they said, well, we get together once a month and we share resources. And so basically it's a RIA for personal development. They get together once a month, and they share. Someone comes in and speaks, and then they share some wisdom, and then you have the opportunity to meet with them and buy their products or what have you. I mean, it's basically a RIA for personal development. And I had no idea they existed because I spent my life in the studios or on the road as a musician, touring. So I was like, this is insane. So I went to this meeting, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. I'm meeting the right people. So applying the same things that I learned with Tony and into music, I am now applying in the Tony community, surrounding myself with people who have the wisdom, have the experience, who have the resources that I'm looking to connect. So I just started building great relationships. I worked my way up to be a leader within that organization. And one of the guys that I met there moved to California and became friends with Jarek, Tony's son. So he calls me up and he said, hey, dude, Tony's doing this thing where he's doing these virtual events. And, you know, I think you'd be great for that. You know, just letting you know, like, Jarek let me know what's going on. I think that's something that would be good for you. You know, I thought of you. So I was like, oh, this is great. So I had built some relationship with some Tony people on the inside, because I had done some work with the foundation, Tony's foundation. One of the things I did was, you know, because I built that relationship, like, meaning applying what Tony had done, I started going to events, I started meeting people. I brought some of Tony's stuff to a silent auction when I was still in music. I did a celebrity golf tournament thing with, like, Alice Cooper and, you know, Tico Torres and Little Steven and whatnot. And I brought some of Tony's stuff there to do for a silent auction. So I knew some of the people inside, and then they introduced me to some people because I called them up and I'm like, hey, is this true? And they were like, well, yeah. So the guy who I called, he goes, well, just send me your resume. And I was like, dude, I don't have a resume. I was like, I could send you my discography. I said, I've been making records for the last, 10 years. I said, I make records, I make music. I haven't had a job in, I don't know how long. And he's like, okay, well, just send what you got. So I sent it in, business owner, producer, my discography, my experience, and a little cover story about my experience, like applying what Tony taught me, et cetera. And without getting to the whole gory details of that, it took me 6 months to get the gig. And what had happened was they were going through some flux within the organization. So the guy who was the president and all this had left, and there's a new guy and blah, 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 long story. So the HR person said, hey, look, thank you. Here's the deal. We're going through some flux right now. And it's going to be a few months. She's like, I don't know when we're going to pick this back up because it's really a lot going on. And I said, that's cool. I said, tell you what, I'm going to call you every Friday, and you don't have to pick up because you'll know it's me. I know you'll know it's me. I said, you don't have to pick up, but I'm going to leave you a story or a joke or something. I'm just going to do that every Friday because I know out of sight, out of mind. So just know I'm going to do that. And I did. For months, every Friday, I would just call and leave a message of a story or a joke or what have you. Then we started to pick up the process. New people came in and and I got through a couple of interviews, and then I got stopped. And the two reasons that were given were, one, I already had a business and they were concerned that I would, that there would be an issue because if you looked at my resume, it had, producer, engineer, and all the records that I'd done. So she thought I was like really busy with that because she didn't know really this was still new, and like the music freaking out. You like on the inside, you knew what the F. On the outside, I mean, there's still records being made. Like you wouldn't know that, like how necessarily as much of the decimation to the industry, because there's still people creating, but they're not making the kind of money they used to. So, and then the other one was I hadn't done sales before because it was basically a sales gig. All speaking is sales. So the gig was to go in and do these presentations, do these trainings. And at the end of the training, we're basically, if you like that, you'll love spending a weekend with Tony, just like the summit, right? Hey, you love this 3 days. You'll love doing the mastery. You'll love more of this. So the person kicked back to the HR and said, yeah, no, here are the two reasons why we're going to pass. And the HR person took a stand for me. And she said, you don't understand. This guy has all the character traits necessary to be successful in this industry for what we're asking him to do, the perseverance, the discipline. He said he was going to call every week, and he did. He was followed through, and this is what we need. He lives the product. And that's what pushed me through to the next level, And then I ended up getting the gig, became one of the top performers. So I shared that with you to really the whole idea of how you do anything is how you do everything. That perseverance, that discipline, that willingness to keep pushing through, even when you're not getting feedback. She wasn't responding. She wasn't letting me know that she got the message or not. I had no idea whether she was getting it. I had no idea whether she was annoyed or not. I didn't know if she was rolling her eyes every time she saw that. I was like, but I'm doing it anyway. I said I was going to do it. And that's what I believe in. And I kept pushing through. So where does this apply in our real estate career? Everywhere. Right? Yeah, everywhere.
Never give up. That was awesome.
Yeah. And we just keep calling. And then I ended up raising close to $1 million for a software company that I had met kind of peripherally. Again, it's about perseverance. I met this guy. I got his number. He was the money behind the Backstreet Boys. He was the money behind Lou Pearlman. So you know the name Lou Pearlman if you're familiar with the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and all of that and all the craziness that went on with him. This was the money behind that. He was the money that Lou got his financing from. And so I got his number and I called him one day. I don't remember what year it was. It was like, I don't remember, but something happened in the stock market. So I call him up and I'm like, hey, Eric, what's going on? My name's Doug. I got your number from whomever, but I think it doesn't matter. And he's like, I'd love to talk to you, Doug. Would you see what the market is doing right now? was like, no. He goes, I got to go. Click. And I was like, holy crap. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do? Like, why? Oh man, I know he's in high finance. Why didn't I look at the stock market before I called him? Man, I could have had something to talk to him about. I would have known better. And like, I go through this whole talk in my head, like, oh God, he's never going to talk to me again. And it messed me up for years. I did not call him back for years. The industry starts tanking, starts doing all this. And I'm like, crap, I got to figure something out. So I called him back. I didn't tell him that I called him that other time. I didn't tell him about that right away. So I get him on the phone. Hey, Eric, He goes, okay, great. Yeah, let's get together. Here's my address. It was like 3 weeks from then. He's like, come on down. And I said, all right, yeah, okay, cool. And like a couple days before, he calls me up and says, hey, Doug, I'm sorry, I got to cancel. I'm like, okay. So I called him back and I'm like, book it again. 3-4 weeks, whatever it is. He's a busy guy. Wouldn't you know it? Day or two before, cancels. He did that 4 times. Till finally I book it. I'm like, and each time I'm thinking to myself, what the crap? Like, is he blowing me off? What's going on? So I'm like, no, I just remember, how did I get this gig with Tony? What was it? It was persistence. I kept going and going and going. So I pick up the phone again, book it again. Finally gets the meeting. I show up at his Upper East Side apartment. He owns the whole floor. It's amazing. I walk in and it's like overlooking the 59th Street Bridge. Like, it's gorgeous. Comes in, he's on the phone. He comes in, he sits down. He's got this, like in this nice desk with a sunken living room with like a big file. It was just amazing. And he points to the newspaper, pushes it to me, and then goes like, hey, that's who I'm on the phone with. So I read the article, and it's about the last piece of beachfront property in Mexico that was stolen from Eric by the son of the president of Mexico. He was on the phone with the State Department trying to get his property back. Like, this is the game he's playing. So he gets off the phone, finally sits down, and he goes, I took this meeting? I was like, no, I actually don't. And he's like, I owed it to you. I said, you never gave up. You would not give up. And I don't mean in a negative way, like you are annoying me. He said, I don't have people in my world that give up. The people in my world get results, and you got results. And I was like, wow. And I just sat there and just started talking to him, just learning about him, learning about how he got, who he was and where he came from. He started out, his father died when he was 7. He had to start working at a very young age. He didn't even finish high school. And then he became the youngest VP of like JP Morgan, like in history. He owned merchant banks. He was like all this crazy, crazy stuff. And we started learning about like what his passions are and whatnot. And he says, well, my passion is, is obviously music. But it's like music, art, and science. And I was like, really? Well, how do you, like, you're a financier, like he's like, yeah, I just do that to pay for stuff, like for things that are important. He goes, I own this resort in Mexico. And it was the resort that Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise were going to get married in. And it got hit by the hurricane, but it's like a high, like luxury resort. And he's like, so I love art. So what I do is, he goes, I fund all the local artists, and they create art for the rooms, and then they put it in the rooms, and then these people buy the art from their rooms. So they have this incredible holiday with their loved ones. They have their wedding there. They have all this stuff. And then they are able to buy a piece of the art that's in their room, and it's helping the local artists, and they make some money. We have this great way of allowing the clients to bring something home from the place. They remember us. It's like, it's a great model. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And some other things around art and music, obviously music. And then, and I said, well, what about science? And then he goes into this whole thing about this science thing that he's doing about security and blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting into the whole thing. He's like, and right now I'm raising the money to take other stuff, to take it public, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I need about, it's like, I'm looking like $2 to $5 million, right now. This is going back 20 years. And And I was like, okay. So, and then we dug in deeper. So I thought I'd only be there for like a half hour or something. I didn't care how long it would have been there. I was there all day. He invited me out to dinner. And I was just like, my ex-wife, well, now ex-wife at the time, was just like, oh, no. Let me just go here. Let's get to dinner another time. We became good friends. So I ended up raising about $1 million. So 25 million is what he needed. And 2 million was the maximum he would take from any one person. So I raised about $1 million from my friends and family and whatnot in this company. Long story short, the company, he died. He ended up dying in a car accident, and there's still it's still under the company that we did. He ended up giving 51% to his partner, who was the creator of the technology, and he turned out to be not very scrupulous. So the company's still in business. We still technically own stock. We just have no way to sell it because it's still in the court battles and all of that. So it's one of those things that, maybe Ellie will have a benefit from, because who knows how long this will be dragged out for. But he said to me, one of the things I asked him, and this guy is a billionaire, I said, like, what is money to you? Like, what is it? And he looked at me and he goes, Doug, it is your responsibility to make as much as you possibly can, morally, ethically, and legally. It's your duty, because if you don't have it, you can't help anyone with it. And he's very philanthropic. And he was like, basically, it's your responsibility to earn as much as you can. Now, I'll back up. My dad and I did not get along very well for many years, because I wanted to rock and he wanted me to go to school and be a banker. He was a banker and an attorney, and every one of his brothers are a PhD on some level. We just didn't get along, because I just wanted to do it myself. I didn't, school was not for me, like the school of hard knocks. I got a PhD in results. And I went to him and I was like, Dad, what's money to you? And I'm trying to now understand him more. Like Eric helped me understand kind of a mindset around finances. And we talked for hours and hours and hours. I'm just giving you some obviously very quick high level bits. And my dad goes, well, I like golf. I was like, yeah. And he goes, those, growing up when I was doing all those golf things, he helped Jack Nicklaus build condominium projects and golf courses and all of that. And he's like, I like golf. He goes, do you know how many jobs, how many people it takes to build a golf course and a condominium complex? You know how many jobs that creates? I was like, no. Because you know how many jobs are created just to maintain the golf course, the country club, and the condominiums? And I'm like, no, I don't. And he goes, do you have any homes that get created by that, for places for people to live? I was like, I guess however many you build. He goes, yeah, a lot. He goes, I'm providing opportunity through lending. I'm providing jobs and I'm providing homes. And I just happen to like golf, so I do it in that space. And then I was like, ugh, you're not a dick after all. I had a deeper understanding of what he did and why he did it, which then leads me ultimately to, and then my whole story goes crazy that, and basically then I moved into the drug and alcohol treatment space, and that was where I was able to be consistent enough, staying in one place, not traveling and all of that. I was like, okay, now I'm going to get into real estate, and that's where we built our basically our legacy is through real estate. But it's about the mindset, and always, Walter talks about it, like being morally, ethically, legally doing things. Real estate is a great vehicle to do it, because it is transactional. It is helping people. It is providing homes or solving problems, right? We're not looking at, yes, there are opportunities, and yes, it's unfortunate that very often you have the D's of opportunity, death, divorce, debt, delinquency, like all of these that create those opportunities that you and I will find. and we're still helping someone with whatever that is. Maybe we're helping them get out of a foreclosure. Maybe we're helping them, basically their family just died and they're like, oh my gosh, I just want this off my plate. I don't want to deal with it. Right. So there are opportunities that can come from someone else's pain that we can help solve. Or if we're providing a home for somebody, now that we purchase this, now we can rent it or sell it. So one of the most valuable things that you and I can do is be really present to how are we serving through this process. And even though sometimes it may appear opportunistic to other people, that we move past that. Because I used to think that with my dad, like, oh, you're a dick, you're all these rich assholes. Oh, they're taking advantage of people. I was like, well, no, they're not. They're actually helping other people. And that sometimes has been a block. That was a block for me a little bit because I grew up in, so Josh, where are you on Long Island?
Suffolk.
Okay.
County.
So I grew up in Garden City.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, nice. So, but it's a decent area. And we were the poor kids. Like we were the poor kids there. We lived, like my dad struggled to get us there because the school system, and he grew up, he traveled a lot. He was an Army brat, but he was living in New Hyde Park and he worked as a caddy at the Garden City Country Club. So like that was like a goal of his. So he struggled to get in there. It was not a legacy family in there. So we were the poor kids. I didn't have a car. We were, like the Marshalls and thrift stores clothes. Like it was not, our jobs, right? So
yeah,
I was the dirt head, the stoner, the metalhead, the dirt bag, all of that in school. So I had this really negative association to financial success and abundance because a lot of the people who had it were dicks to me. So I just assumed that they were dicks all around. Obviously, it's not until I got older and had a deeper understanding and became more wise. And now some of my friends that still live in Garden City, we have fantastic relationships, but they were same thing. They were the poor kids. I hung out with the poor kids, but they turned it around and many of them stayed. So it's all in the mindset. It's all our relationship. So then the last piece is applying that mindset around hanging around with people who their normal is what you or I aspire to. And then that's when we pick up their mindset. We pick up their beliefs. We pick up their way of approaching things and how they show up. And then you also get access to, when you hang out with them, you have access to their resources. So I'll leave you with this last thought. I have this friend, Julio, who's a billionaire and he's crushing it in real estate with like cost segregation, but he's an engineer and a tax attorney. He's got just his company alone is up to 160 employees, but then his other peripheral companies that he's got these strong strategic partnerships, he's over 400 employees nationwide. And some of their salespeople make $1 million a year. Like that's their salespeople. That's the volume of the kind of gigs they're doing. So he and I and my wife and his wife, like we're buds and we hang out, not a lot, but enough. And he's buds with, whether you like him or not, Trump and that whole crew. Like, when we go there, last time I had lunch with him, Trump was at Trump International and he's a member there. And so like these are the places we're hanging. And he introduces me to people and I get instant credibility because if it comes from him, they're like, oh, you're buds with Julio. Yeah, of course. What do you need? Right. So, and now I'm working with him on some other business stuff with his companies and whatnot. But I share that with you because Thurben had talked a little bit earlier about the power of communication. Is that basically the quality of our communication is going to reflect the quality of our life, quality of our communication with ourselves. And when we can communicate with ourselves more effectively, we can, of course, communicate with others, which allows us to put ourselves in challenging situations. Because I'm not a billionaire and I don't hang out with Trump or any of these people, but I have the courage and the the understanding and the confidence to go up to this guy, call him up and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Let's go grab dinner. And he'll go, oh, okay, yeah, great. Yeah, love you. Let's meet me at Trump International. And I feel bad because I can't pay because he's a member and I'm not. And he's like, no, your money's no good here. And that's like kind of I feel bad because I'm like, dude, when are you going to let me pay? You got to go somewhere that's not one of your clubs. Quality problem. Not, it's not a bad one to have when most of the time it's at his cool places. But I share that with you because the more we dig into our mindset and we focus on our ability to communicate, the more effective we're going to be when it's time to negotiate, when we're going in to make an offer, because like, oh man, we can do this, can make it happen. So all the time that you spend going through these RIAs, like, challenge yourself to meet somebody and go, hey, let's grab coffee. I'd love to learn more about who you are, what your goals are. And I could see if there's an alignment. My Rolodex is open for you. So I may know somebody who's going to support you in getting to what you are looking to accomplish. And that's in large part how I've built my relationships, is just bringing to the table. I've brought Julio business for cost segregation and that kind of thing, and brought him some other people. And he in turn loves to introduce me to people. And then, like, oh, cool. Here's this cool person. So I would end this conversation on my end with the thought on how can you challenge yourself to greatness by surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to greatness, who are playing at a higher level, that are going to challenge you to stretch, right? And with this thought, I play racquetball. I love playing racquetball. There's some people I play with that I've kind of leveled out now. Like I'm as good as they are. So now we're kind of stuck. We need to play with people who are better than us, who kick our ass, so that we could go, oh my gosh, now, like I'm learning it. It's challenging us to greatness. So what are some ways you could do that? And I know it's kind of a rote statement, and it's because it's true that when we hang with people who challenge us to greatness, we stretch ourselves and we're able to deliver at a much higher level. And that's all I have to say about that.
Wow, dude. That was amazing.
That is awesome. And then, Josh, did you have any questions?
It's just amazing how everything fell together for you, Doug. It's all mindset, right? So I'm just like, man, because I'm kind of in like a situation where, where you were like feeling like the music industry like turned on you.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't able to, but it's because I'm like, I started this contract business, and then I'm basically maxed out my credit cards, and I'm starting over, kind of like, so I gotta like keep the mindset going. But man, I appreciate you, because this is pretty motivating for me. So
well, if it makes you feel better, I've been there multiple times.
Did you do affirmations every day, or what was it that kept you?
Yeah, so affirmations have always been a part of it. Taking notice of what, and I talk about this at the summit. I talk about it in everything. My fundamental is those three pillars, right? State, strategy, and story. So I mind my state, right? My emotional intelligence, my emotional quotient, like because I know that if I show up beaten, if I show up feeling like, oh, nobody's gonna want, all right, they're not gonna want to, why would they want to bother talking to me, right? That they're not gonna want to, because people feel that. So essentially, it's get out of our own head, right? Because we can't change whatever the reality is. Like, it's raining out, right? Let's say it's raining out. We can affirm it's not raining, it's not raining, it's not raining. It's still raining, right? We're gonna go outside, we're still gonna get wet. So then I would go, okay, what is the state that I want to be in to be effective in whatever my next step is, and coming from a state of service. So like with Eric, industry's crashing, things are falling apart now at this point, and I'm going into Eric, and I don't have I am not making the money. I'm not doing, the six figures, multiple six figures. I'm not doing any of that. I'm like freaking out, and I'm thinking I'm going to meet Eric, and I'm hoping that he's going to have some insight. And I was open at this point. I was like, it doesn't have to be in music. I went there because of my understanding of him was he financed Lou. And, I was like, oh, maybe maybe we could start a label. I have some ideas around like had a whole idea around, kind of a tech thing around which now we almost have in our phones. Like I was like, okay, for an MP3, it's like, imagine if, you had you had hyperlinks to everything. So you have the album cover, and then, you could, just by looking at that, you could click on what guitars are they using, or, what microphones did they use, or like unpack. That was like my idea around that. And I just wanted to talk to somebody about it. So I went in totally open to, at that point, I didn't feel like I had anything to offer Eric, but what I wanted to provide was to let him know that I wasn't there to take anything, that I was really genuinely curious about who he was. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted to learn. And believe it or not, really successful people appreciate that.
Well,
and
I appreciate you and learning from you. That was definitely an eye opener for me. I appreciate it.
And so, and if you're ever feeling like that, here's the other thing. I'll give you a little tool around that. If you're ever feeling like you're in a non-resourceful state, maybe you're angry or you're frustrated or anxious or whatever it is, notice a couple things. What are you doing with your body? Change that. Like, notice how are you holding, where are your shoulders, how are you breathing? Just change your physiology. And then notice the dialogue, right? The reason why affirmations work is the goal is to essentially reprogram your brain or fill the vacuum of, if I'm going, oh shit, if I flip it around into, I now command my unconscious mind to access all my internal resources, give me the strength, the wisdom, the humor, the knowledge, whatever it takes to, now that overcomes the, oh shit, or what am I going to do? It starts filling it with, how can I serve? How can I add more value? What else could I be grateful for right now? What could I bring to this conversation? Because I may not have money, but I may have resources. Let me ask better questions, more questions like, how can I serve you? What is your ideal referral? What is your ideal contact? If I were out there, representing you, what is it that you're looking for? And if I could bring you this resource, would that be of value? And like with Julio, like one of the things was cost seg. He was like, he saw I brought a couple, but it's like, it's not my main thing, but he knows I didn't, and I don't really understand it completely. And it's not my main business, but he sent someone from his office over to me. Like we're out to a lunch thing. And he was like, oh, the girl comes up, he goes, oh, Julio, said, he wanted me to come over and just, offer you any support you needed around the cost seg and these other things. Cause, it seems like, you've got amazing resources. You just, maybe haven't capitalized on them. Let me support you on that. And, if Julio says that, you're a dude, it's like, I'm here for you. So when you put that out there, and just the last thing is not think in terms of direct reciprocity. I don't ask for anything from Julio, and I'll tell you, it's exactly the conversation I had with him a little while ago. I said, look, dude, he said, I said, I'm torn. I said, Heidi and I love you and Leslie. Like, I just love you as a person. And I know, this, I just want to be sure, like, I don't want anything from you. Like, I didn't like, I don't want, like, I'm not doing any of this to be like, do business with you. Like, I do this because I dig you and you're just a cool dude. And he's like, oh yeah, no, let's do both. And so then the other day he sent me like, and it's kind of a new thing that we're working on. He sent me like 30 pages of like he had some issues with his company, with the president and the EVP, and basically I'm consulting him. And then I had a 2-hour call with his head of HR, And then just now my other partner had a call with her yesterday, and now we're putting together a proposal. Never asked for a thing. Just showed up. Now I've known him for years, and I've done a few gigs with his leadership, and you know, he always introduces me and stuff, but I'm not like gimme, gimme, gimme. I'm like, how can I add value? How can I add value? And sometimes it might be a longer game. Some people are hammer closers, and that's appropriate for some. That's not my style. And I don't think of reciprocity. I think of, hey, I give, and then the universe sends back, and I'll be happy to receive it from anywhere.
That's awesome. That is for sure. The universe gives as long as you want it.
Yeah, and it just should be open to receive. So if I give to you, I don't expect anything from you. I'll receive anything, but I'm not expecting anything. I just know I give. Now my hands are open, and I'm happy to receive from wherever it comes in. And that's where intentions and motives matter.
I like the way that's put.
Thank you. And go ahead, Thurben.
Oh, and I was gonna say I had 2 questions for you. So I was wondering if you had to like start over from ground zero, and you had like nothing but maybe your knowledge and some of your contacts, what would you do to get back to like 6 figures or millionaire status? Like, what would you do differently if you had to like begin again?
I'd probably take more chances, and not like, knowing what I know now, I think I waited too long to do certain things. I overanalyzed, you know, and especially in real estate, I wish I would have started sooner. But like right now, it's interesting. Like, people are coming up with all the reasons why not to, and like, oh, you know, holding off. And I'm like, the numbers make sense. I'm doing it. Like, I'm not waiting for it to drop again. I'm not, or like, you know, I'm still doing deals, and I'm more cautious, and I'm definitely, you know, running like just being more certain about it, and walking away from more because like, you know what? And I'm seeing people buying them, and I've lost a lot of deals, put a lot of offers in, and people are like, no, you know, they're like, well, whoever got that for that, good on them. Like, if they can make it work, awesome. I'm not comfortable with that, and I'm okay with missing it. I don't feel like FOMO because, you know, I offered, you know, 200 and they took 225. I'm like, 225 was too much for me. I'm not like that. I couldn't make that work comfortably. Will they make it work? Maybe, but I'm okay with my comfort zone. But I make a lot more offers than I used to, like when I first started. So everything I probably just would have done sooner instead of over educating myself. I think that's where I think many of us have gotten in that place of over educating and just taking action more quickly.